After 6 years of grueling global struggle, World War II officially ends with the surrender of the Japanese Empire, 4 months after Germany's surrender in May. Overall, the deadliest conflict in human history resulted in the deaths of 70 to 85 million, laying to waste cities, millions of people displaced, and a long road ahead to repair the critically damaged infrastructure across the globe. The new issues of mass displacement forced governments to shift from production of weapons and armaments to housing on a mass production scale, as temporary structures are quickly erected in the thousands. Material and production shortages allow for radical new visions to emerge, focusing on a product that was low cost, quick to build, and readily available: concrete. This was the birth of brutalism. Embraced by architects and designers alike, it adhered to modernist principles and used as a tool for social progress to provide homes for people that were affordable, efficient, and monumental. Did brutalism live up to its utopian post-war ambitions? This is the story of post-war housing and brutalism, its rise, fall, and uncertain future. The true devastation of the war's impact on global infrastructure wasn't truly apparent till after the dust had settled. In Europe, Great Britain, which had suffered heavily from German aerial blitz, saw 30% of dwellings destroyed or damaged. Germany suffered even heavier damages, with 41% of its major cities and 39% of its dwellings destroyed or damaged. Other countries, such as France, the Netherlands, and Belgium, lost 20% of dwellings. Countries like the United States and Australia, while mostly didn't have any direct conflict on home soil, still suffered extreme housing shortages after the war. The Great Depression, which started 10 years before the start of World War II, meant fewer and fewer houses were being built in this period. With the outbreak of the war, materials and finances were put towards the war effort, hampering the number of houses built during this time. As the war ended and soldiers returned home, along with the inflow of immigrants fleeing war-torn countries, the housing stock did not have the capacity to house this number of people. Over in the US, an estimated 2.5 million houses were acquired. As stated in the March 1946 issue of Popular Science, even if 1.2 permanent homes are now built every year, and the United States never built more than 1 million in a single year, it will be 10 years before the whole nation is properly housed. Temporary housing was used as relief, while more permanent structures could be built, all but slowly. The most popular scene during this time was the Quonset hut, a military prefabricated hut sold to the public from surplus after the war. These huts were designed to be lightweight and able to be shipped anywhere, manufactured from steel, corrugated iron and plywood. With the establishment of more permanent housing, developments like Levittown were at the forefront of the response to the post-war housing crisis. This focused mainly on the characteristics of smaller houses, efficient construction, and mass production. Houses were shrunk by roughly half the average size, construction was broken down into 26 steps, allowing for more efficient construction, identical bundles of material were dropped off at each site, and the production line of contractors rotated from site to site. At its height, 13 houses a day were completed. Levittown became a symbol of post-war suburbia and the first mass-produced suburb. In Europe, where post-war recovery efforts were being made, France had only 14 million dwellings for a population of 14.5 million people, with almost half of these existing dwellings not having running water. France utilised its former army barracks as temporary housing as part of its transitional phase, while also relying on prefabricated temporary dwellings. French metalworker and architect Jean Poudreau was contracted by the Ministry of Reconstruction and Town Planning to build prefabricated dwellings based on his portal frame barracks, but were altered due to the lack of steel. While the shift to more permanent structures was happening as France began to find its feet through the application of affordable public housing through the HLMS and Grand Ensembles, architects such as Le Corbusier experimented with modernist housing theories and how they can be used as a direct response to the French housing crisis. Unit de Habitat by Le Corbusier is exactly this, responding to the need of mass housing through a high-density vertical garden designed to be a communal, self-contained ecosystem with shops, restaurants, daycare centres, sports centres, and other facilities. The structure was built out of rough cast concrete, which should have been much cheaper and more attainable than steel. This created a raw, honest materiality for the exterior, while in form created a monolithic appearance. Not only did this create a blueprint for modern post-war high-density housing, but inspired what was to come architecturally. England also saw the allure of prefabricated housing to help with the housing deficit of over 200,000 homes. Prime Minister Winston Churchill set up the Burke Committee in 1942, who highlighted the use of prefab housing as a solution to the housing crisis. 2 years later, UK Parliament passed the Housing Temporary Accommodation Act of 1944. This highlighted several minimum standards for temporary dwellings, such as floor space, width for transportation, paint colours, and a 10-year maximum lifespan. After the supply issues were sorted out, these temporary dwellings were mainly made out of steel, aluminium, or wooden frames, with asbestos cement sheeting, steel, or aluminium cladding. By January 1947, 100,000 temporary dwellings had been built. At the same time, precast reinforced concrete was also being used as a material of choice, as resources were still in short supply and the temporary housing program only dampened the demand for housing. Concrete proved to be a durable product, giving these houses a lifetime of 60 years, 6 times the life of the other temporary houses, giving them an almost permanent fixture. Concrete was also cheap, and panels could be made in mass in a factory and then shipped out to sites. These houses include the likes of the Lang Easy Form, the Airy House, and the Whippy No Fines House. These used either prefabricated concrete parts or made in situ on site, contributing to 500,000 prefabricated structures made post-war. However, this approach wasn't all praises. English architect couple Maxwell Fry and Jane Drew, although supported the movement towards housing on a mass production scale, did raise concerns that despite its claimed temporary nature that it was intended for, they were worried that it would be a permanent solution to the housing issues and not transition fully into permanent structures. British architect and critic Kenneth Frampton also discussed how during this time period, England lacked the materiality and necessity for any type of architectural expression. The transition of permanent structures in the 1950s saw the continued use of concrete as building material, both in prefabricated and in situ form. With this came a new wave of architectural theory out of England, one with a focus on modernist, utopian, and socialist ideology. Originating out of Sweden, but born in post-war England, brutalism. The roots of brutalism are first seen in the Swedish house, Villa Gut by Edmund and Holm in 1950. Its origins coming from another Swedish architect, describing the project as New Brutalism. Villa Gut rejected the formal purity of earlier modernism and embraced the as-found condition, leaving materiality and finishes raw, including its brick facade, exposed I-beam lintels over the windows, and raw concrete structure, with markings left over from the formwork. It wasn't long till this idea had spread to England through some English architects in Sweden, and the now shortened brutalism movement was born. The first built example of brutalism in England was the Huntston School in 1955. It represents the foundation of future brutalist structures, especially brutalist housing. Its architects, Alison and Peter Smithson, who are the pioneers of the brutalist movement, used elements from Villa Gut as inspiration, such as the as-found form, but also drew from other architectural works, such as Mies van der Rohe's Illinois Institute of Technology. The building was a statement piece by the two up-and-coming architects on how British architecture should be post-war, and responded to the more cheerful trends of British architecture in the 1950s. Rainer Braunum, who coined the term New Brutalism, outlined how this was the defining building for brutalism, and advocated for its honesty and raw materials and function. Braunum also went to later define the three primary characteristics of brutalism as memorable as an image, clear exhibition of structure, and valuation of material as found, all seen in the Huntston School. As brutalism shifted from institutional buildings to housing, the same properties that made it successful in these applications made it successful in the latter. The 1958 Langham House close can see influence from both the brutalist movement but also the works of Le Corbusier in his Mise en Jeu. While the building fits into Barnum's three primary characteristics for brutalism, the influence of Le Corbusier is still apparent. Park Hill Housing Estate by architects Jack Lynn and Ivor Smith saw the evolution of brutalist theory, particularly around urbanism, community and social architecture, drawing inspiration off both the Smithson's unbuilt Golden Lane project and unit habitation, using concepts of both vertical cities and gardens in the sky from both, seen in the verticality and elevated walkways. The Golden Lane project aimed to upgrade the ordinary and be used as a tool for social change, an idea enforced in Park Hill Estate, both trying to create utopian ideas through replacing the deteriorating slums with clean, affordable housing without breaking the social fabric. Neighbours were rehoused next to each other and old street names reused. Like unit habitation, Park Hill was designed to be a self-sufficient ecosystem, having amenities for all residents, reinforcing the utopian visions. The design itself was a framework for social and spatial order, creating a massive, expressive structure that was both functional and ideological, utilising brutalist ideologies created by the Smithsons on a larger and more complex scale. It wasn't long until the Smithsons built their own brutalist housing estate, with Robin Hood Gardens completed in 1971. Again, this pioneered their developed brutalist ideology and streets in the sky, creating large street-like social spaces across certain floors, reminiscent of public streets. This aimed to recreate the social intimacy and connectivity of traditional street life. The building itself was designed around the residents, utilising pathways used by the residents to dictate the form. Like the Park Hill Estate, it also used green spaces to create more social cohesion, centering the two 10-storey blocks around the central space, designed to be utilised by the residents. Ultimately, these ideas in their unsuccessful Golden Lane proposal and brutalist ideologies is what helped form the Robin Hood Gardens estate, set in utopian and socialist visions. Ultimately, it's up for debate if brutalism really did live up to these visions. As the 1970s and the 1980s rolled around, the public housing budget was radically cut, allowing for little money for upkeep and maintenance, leading to decay and damage. Eventually, this led to the common association of brutalism to decline. Although it wasn't the design that failed it, it was the policies tied to it. The utopian and social visions that brutalism was designed to address, providing housing to the masses, led to its downfall, as little time or effort was put into them after their construction due to budget and stigma associated with public housing. The raw honesty to materiality, especially concrete, once praised by critics, was now seen by the general public as joyless and dystopian, representing the perceived failures of post-war urban planning. However, brutalism represented a radical and deeply idealistic movement when architecture was tasked with reshaping society in the aftermath of war. Its roots in socialist and utopian visions sees architecture addressing the masses in a human-centric way. As of today, brutalist structures are more and more at risk of demolition, as too many historic brutalist structures have been demolished or up for demolition, including Robin Hood Gardens. The legacy of brutalism remains contested, with many of its ambitious ideals overshadowed by the failures of the system meant to support it. Despite its decline, brutalism's utopian aspirations continue to inspire contemporary discussions about the role of architecture in social change, reminding us that the true measure of its success lies not in the concrete forms, but its social visions it sought to realise. As these structures face increasing demolition, the preservation becomes not just a defence of architectural history, but a reminder of a time when architecture dared to envision a more egalitarian future.